Welcome back to free audiobook. Cultivation World. She Only Won a Farm in Peace Book 4. Written by author Dai Fan. Voiced by Ava from Clipchamp. Wish you enjoy with this fantasy novel. Chapter list introduction of Book 4. Book 4 has a total of chapters 38 to 48. Total 14,875 words. Sequel to chapter 38. So when he saw Ye Jun attacking him with a spear, he loved Ye Jun even more for her strength. After fighting for a while, Ye Jun started to lose strength. Her dantian started to run out of spiritual energy. She felt danger. She remembered that she still had a life experience card. She took it out and activated it. She immediately raised her level to level 17 of the Foundation establishment. With a plentiful source of spiritual energy, comfortable from the experience card, she happily thought that she would win. When Van House saw Ye Jun pull out a card, he remained calm. Then, noticing that Ye Jun's cultivation level had increased dramatically, he showed no curiosity but squinted his eyes to observe. A series of attacks from Ye Jun followed. Although Ye Jun had activated the experience card, her cultivation level only rose to 17, while Van House remained at 20, 3 minor realms higher. Unaware of the gap, Ye Jun focused solely on attacking. Everyone was watching the battle intently, but elsewhere, one of Van House subordinates had silently captured Jun So while he was still engrossed in Ye Jun's fight. Ye Jun didn't know anything, still focused on fighting. After fighting for a while, Van House felt bored, so he launched a strike. The two strikes clashed against each other. Because Ye Jun's realm was weaker, she was sent flying far away. Her internal organs were shaken. Ye Jun spat out a mouthful of blood, but she still held back, continuing to return to fight even though she was injured. Van House raised his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, stop, look." Then he pointed to Jun So. Ye Jun turned back and saw that Jun So had already been captured. Her face darkened with each passing moment. She could do nothing anymore. Van House smirked. "If you agree to become my concubine, I will spare your child. What do you think?" Ye Jun choked back her anger. Thinking of Jun So, she could only let her tears fall and nod in agreement. "You must spare my child. I want him to stay close to me." Jun So, seeing his father in tears, felt a deep sense of grievance. Yet he too was powerless. Van House nodded in satisfaction. Without another word, they all flew back to his estate. He didn't even bother to check Ye Jun's belongings or question how she had rapidly increased her strength. He assumed that such methods existed within sects as well, alchemy pills or secret arts, but the price for such rapid growth was often too great, leaving permanent damage to the body. To him, it wasn't worth his concern. Upon arrival, Ye Jun and Jun So were separated. Jun So was locked away in a different area, while Ye Jun was placed in a luxurious chamber. For 3 days, servants (female attendant) constantly visited her, taking her measurements, preparing outfits, and delivering food. On the 4th day, everything was set. A female attendant informed her, "Tomorrow is your grand wedding day. You will be wed to our young master." Ye Jun remained silent, swallowing her grievances. She had already resigned herself to her fate. For the past 3 days, frustration and helplessness consumed her, but there was nothing she could do. Though she carried the soul of a man, she was trapped in the body of a woman. And now, faced with this cruel reality, she had no choice but to accept it. There was no escaping anymore, only surrendering to fate with bitter reluctance. She had been granted a system, yet it couldn't change her destiny. Weak, fragile, and powerless, she could only endure. She tried to think positively. In the modern world, even men could marry each other. This was nothing unusual. Slowly, Ye Jun's mindset began to open up, becoming slightly more accepting. The wedding between Ye Jun and Van House was held hastily, almost like a mere formality. The only attendees were Van House friends and a handful of inner and outer disciples from the Thanh Van Sect. Dressed in a stunning pink gown, Ye Jun stepped onto the ceremonial stage. She glanced around. Not a single elder was present to witness or offer blessings, but she didn't care. Within mere minutes, she became his bride. How many concubines had come before her? She had no idea. After the ceremony ended, she was escorted to an opulent bridal chamber where a lavish banquet was set before her. The table was filled with exquisite dishes, many of which she had never seen before, extravagantly expensive delicacies beyond her reach in the past. Van Hao entertained guests until the evening. It wasn't until they had all left that he finally made his way to the bridal chamber. He stepped inside, drew back the bride's veil, and pressed a kiss against Ye Jun's cheek. Ye Jun felt nothing but discomfort, yet she forced a smile. She had no choice. If she resisted, what would happen to her child? In the end, she had already resigned herself to fate, accepting her place as a mere concubine to a man she barely knew. After all, he had status, power, and strength that far surpassed hers. After the brief kiss, he took her hand and led her to the dining table, pouring wine into 2 cups. "This is a special brew," he said, handing her a cup. "Made from high-grade spirit cane and spiritual grain, enhanced with energy, but mild enough for common consumption." He gestured for her to perform the traditional wedding cross-cup toast, and Ye Jun quietly followed along. They both drank. Ye Jun took a sip and was surprised. The wine was sweet, far different from anything she had tasted in her past life. It was, in a way, delicious. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "I already have a child. You don't mind?" Van Hao simply replied, "I don't." Then he smiled and pulled Ye Jun onto the bed, his hand holding Ye Jun's hand. Even though she had accepted her fate, Ye Jun still felt disgusted. Even so, she tried to calm herself down. Even though she already had a child, for Ye Jun, this was truly the first time she experienced this kind of feeling. A real feeling disgusted, being mukbanged by a strange man. After Van Hao kissed and caressed Ye Jun, he undressed her. After a night of writhing, when she opened her eyes in the morning, her eyes to find that he had already gotten out of bed. Ye Jun sat up and using her technique, she tried her best to clean anything inside her. She didn't want to have pregnant. She didn't want to experience that feeling again. Chapter 39. She cast a water-controlling technique to cleanse her body once more before drying herself off and putting on a fresh set of clothes. She remained seated in meditation, cultivating, until a female attendant entered the room with a meal for her. 1. A meat dish. 2. A fish dish. 3. A vegetable dish with spiritual grain. Seeing the food, Ye Jun paused her cultivation and sat at the table to finish her meal. She thought that since she had already accepted her fate, there was no point in resisting internally anymore. Her thoughts drifted to her child, little Jun So. She wondered when she would be able to see him again, when she could finally be with him. She would wait for the right opportunity. When the time came, she and her son would escape together. But for now, she would simply enjoy the fine food before her. She continued meditating and stayed inside her room, never stepping outside. The entire day passed without a single sight of Van Hao. It wasn't until evening that she finally saw him return. He walked over to the bed, took her hand, and didn't say anything. He continued to kiss her cheek, then took off all her clothes and continued their husband-wife relationship. She had accepted her fate, so she didn't say anything. While she and he were rejoicing, she asked, "When can I see Jun So's child again?" He said, "Wife, just obediently serve me. When I feel good, I will let him see you." Ye Jun heard. She didn't say anything more, just lay there and let him continue to enjoy on her body. The next morning she woke up and still couldn't find the shape of him. Quickly using the clean techniques, continued to remove the white substance inside, continued to do the basic cleaning. Ye Jun also knows men have strong sexual desires. She used to be a man, so she understands, so she can't say anything. The night came again. She continued to see him. He continued to mukbang her. She is still patient, letting him mukbang. While he mukbanging her, she asked, I am originally a spiritual farmer who loves to grow spirit plants. Can I continue farming? Van Hao. Okay, as long as you happily serve me at every night, this job is completely easy to talk. Just like that, the joy and pleasure ended. Until early morning as usual, Ye Jun still couldn't find him anywhere. For several days in a row, she let him mukbang. She could also adapt and start to feel comfortable. As usual, she cleaned everything inside. Still had that idea. She still didn't want to have pregnant. That same morning, Ye Jun noticed a tray filled with seeds of short-cycle plants, along with other types of seeds, neatly arranged. Interspersed among them were instruction books placed on the table. The courtyard where Ye Jun was staying was spacious, with enough land for her to cultivate crops. She selected a few seeds, planted them, and went about her daily tasks, only this time, in a different place. By noon, a beautiful woman arrived and observed Ye Jun in silence. After a few moments, she clicked her tongue and muttered under her breath, She does have some beauty. No wonder my husband took her as a concubine. I wonder how many days he'll dote on her before losing interest? Without saying another word, the woman turned around, shut the door, and left. Though she had spoken softly, Ye Jun heard her words loud and clear. She assumed the woman must be another of his wives or concubines. Even so, Ye Jun didn't care and simply continued with what she was doing. In night, Van Hao continued to enjoy Ye Jun's body, happiness as usual. Ye Jun didn't say anything but just let it be, satisfying Van Hao's sexual. After the first day, she was still embarrassed, but after for a few days, when too familiar, she even started to feel like she was enjoying it. Even though with the thought, she felt a monstrous. She could only exclamatory. She knew that people in the cultivation world were strong, but she didn't expect it to be so strong, continuously dote, mukbang, her to 30 days, exactly 1 month without any fatigue or boredom. She had to give one like for him. The process of continuing to mukbang Ye Jun every night continued to have another 15 days, then the frequency gradually decreased. Every other day, he would mukbang Ye Jun, then gradually decrease the number of days. The gap became longer and longer. It seemed like he was starting to get bored with her. 2 months more passed. After 2 months, Van Hao started to get bored with Ye Jun. The number of times he slept with her gradually decreased, until the 3rd month. It was only once every 15 days that he would come to sleep with her. The frequency of his mukbanging her had decreased. She also felt a little more comfortable, so she spent more time cultivating and taking care of her plants. In just a few days her group of plants would mature. She could harvest. She was very much looking forward to not knowing what reward she would receive from the system. Even though she had become his wife, being his mukbanged every night, she had never once seen Van Hao's parents or elders, only a single visit from one of his beautiful concubines. Not that she cared. All she wanted was for him to keep his word and let her see her son again. She wondered how her child had been these past few months. Was he doing well? Was he being treated kindly? As the final day of the month arrived, the crops she had planted had fully matured. She began harvesting them, storing everything carefully in her spatial pouch. When Ye Jun was captured, that loseful Van Hao hadn't confiscated her belongings. So, she still had a few of her meager possessions. Perhaps they were too insignificant, too worthless for someone like him to bother with. The moment she agreed to become his concubine, he must have known she had surrendered. That was why he had let down his guard, because her son was in his hands. After a few months of having fun with her, he was now bored with her. No matter how beautiful she was, if it wasn't out of true love, when they got bored they would give up. So after 3 months, she could no longer see his face. When the female attendant brought in her meal, Ye Jun finally asked, "Do you know where my husband is? I haven't seen him in a long time." The female attendant replied, "Young master has been busy lately and hasn't had time to visit." Hearing this, the first thought that crossed Ye Jun's mind was, He's probably off admiring some other beautiful woman somewhere. She continued living in the same residence, unable to leave. By now, time is also the last months of the year. Since Van Hal belonged to a powerful family, their most important areas were protected by formations that regulated the weather. Fortunately, Ye Jun was housed in one such courtyard. Outside, snow blanketed in white, but within her residence, the scenery remained lush and green, as if it were eternal spring. The thriving plants gave her the opportunity to cultivate another round of crops before the year ended. During the last harvest, she had stored everything in her spatial pouch rather than selling it to the system. Now, with Van Hal no longer visiting frequently, she finally had the chance to sell them. She went into her room and began sell all her stored produce for the system. Since she had grown new types of crops this time, the system rewarded her with a new basic cultivation technique. The Primordial Heart Sutra. She had no idea what rank it was, but it was the only reward she received despite selling everything she had grown.
Still, she was content.
She immediately started studying it, shifting her cultivation path from that of a spirit plant master to the Primordial Heart Sutra. She spent 3 full days immersed in learning. On the 4th day, she finally reached the entry-level stage. At Chi Refinement Level 7, a faint trace of divine soul energy had already formed within her spirit. However, her previous cultivation technique as a spirit plant master had been too weak to allow her to perceive it. It wasn't until she entered the beginner stage of the Primordial Heart Sutra that she finally sensed it clearly. Once she reached that state, the divine soul energy within her became distinct, vivid, and unmistakable. Even while sitting in her room, simply by focusing, she could extend her soul sense open parenthesis divine sense close parenthesis beyond the walls, perceiving distant locations with astonishing clarity. She estimated that her field of vision could now extend up to a square kilometer in all directions. Clicking her tongue, she muttered, "No wonder I was caught even after fleeing so far." With a soul sense this powerful, anything within a kilometer is completely exposed. Escaping would be nearly impossible. She made a mental note. If I ever run away again, I must push myself far beyond a kilometer. Chapter 40. Despite the freezing winter months, everything inside her small courtyard remained warm and thriving. Each day, Ye Jun stepped into the garden to tend to her crops. Yet, throughout all these months, there was no sign of Van Hal. One day, when the female attendant brought her meal, Ye Jun finally asked, Can you bring my child here?" The female attendant hesitated before responding, "I don't know, my lady. I'll ask young master." A few days later, the female attendant finally had the chance to see Van Hal. After greeting him, she cautiously inquired, "Young master, the lady inside wishes to see her child. Would that be?" Van Hal waved a dismissive hand and said indifferently, "Fine. Let them be together if she wants. I've already lost interest in her. There's no need to concern ourselves with her anymore." The female attendant bowed and replied, "Yes, young master." The next day, the female attendant brought Ye Jun's child in. When she saw Junso, Ye Jun ran over and hugged him and cried. Junso saw his dad running over. He also hugged Junso's father and cried together. He said, "I miss you so much, Dad." After both of them calmed down, they packed up and moved back in together. This small courtyard was big, and having another person living there made it warmer. During the first few months of being Van Hal's wife, Van Hal almost mukbanged Ye Jun every day for the first few months, but the frequency gradually decreased. When he slept with Ye Jun, he wasn't worried that Ye Jun would become pregnant with his child, because she was basically at a low level. His level was already very high, about to break free from the shackles of humanity. The higher his cultivation level, the harder it was to produce offspring. Although it was difficult, it was still possible, but it had to be a combination of 2 people of the same realm. The lower the realm, the lower the odds of this happening, so low that it was only 1 in a million. And unfortunately, Despite having cleaned her body many times, Ye Jun still fell into that situation. She had a fetus. A small embryo had taken root inside her. Ye Jun did not know anything, still certain that she had done a good job of preventing it. The embryo developed slowly. It also did not grow too big for Ye Jun to detect. It also did not signal any signs. When Ye Jun reunited with Jun So, they lived together, and she gradually passed on the new cultivation technique to him. It only took him 2 days to enter the introductory stage, much faster than she had. By the end of the second day, he had already advanced to level 2. Ye Jun realized that this new cultivation method significantly accelerated a cultivator's progress. She was now certain that it was of a high rank. Days passed as she continued tending to the spiritual farmland. By the 10th day of the first month, the spiritual crops had fully matured, ready for harvest. She worked diligently in the small courtyard's garden. Together, she and her son harvested the crops with joy, as if the world only belonged to the two of them. Once the harvest was complete, they quickly spread fertilizer and planted new seeds. The farming process had already been delayed by 11 days. After finishing their tasks, they cleaned themselves and returned to the courtyard to cultivation and have a meal. Meanwhile, deep within the Thanh Van Sect, in the sect master's residence, an elder of average rank, at the peak of the golden core stage, approached the Thanh Van Sect master and said, "Sect master, I have something important to discuss with you." The Thanh Van Sect master replied, "Go ahead, Elder Ta." Ta Hong Hai took out an item and presented it to the sect master. The moment he brought it closer, it suddenly activated, releasing a thick red mist that rapidly enveloped the Thanh Van Sect master. Sensing danger, the sect master reacted instantly, vanishing within the mist while attack against Elder Ta. The two engaged in a fierce battle, drawing the attention of those nearby. With his superior cultivation, the sect master managed to subdue Elder Ta within minutes. Realizing he was at a disadvantage, the elder dropped his disguise and revealed his true nature, a demonic cultivator. Desperate, he switched to demonic technique to fight back, but the power gap was too vast. He was swiftly captured, unable to self-destruct in time. The commotion alarmed other elders, who rushed to the scene. Hidden demonic cultivators among them turned pale, realizing their plans were at risk. Seeing their captured comrade, they launched a sudden ambush against the other elders. Caught off guard, some were injured, but they retaliated with overwhelming force. Realizing they had no chance of victory, the demonic elders swiftly vanished without a trace, leaving Ta behind as the only captive. Once the situation was under control and the traitors were searched, the interrogation began. Using the soul-searching technique, the Thanh Van Sect master extracted Ta's memories, revealing everything in perfect detail within his mind. The Thanh Van Sect master spoke. "The demonic cultivators have seized control of the Ha family clan's territory near the coast. Their plan is to capture all cultivators and transport them to the western continent to refine them into pills." He saw firsthand the pills that Ta, the demonic cultivator, had used. Elder Ta and several others had already been completely turned into medicinal pills. As he relayed this to the gathered elders, the entire room fell silent. Their expressions darkened, and none spoke a word. Shortly after, they sounded the sect's war bells, initiating a full-scale summons to prepare for a cleansing operation against the demonic cultivators at the Ha clan's territory. Within a single day, the entire Thanh Van Sect's forces had assembled. Meanwhile, other demonic cultivators, sensing something was amiss, fled back to the Ha clan's domain to report the situation. Upon receiving warnings from high-ranking demonic cultivators, the Ha clan's demonic forces were further alerted by lower-ranked ones. They immediately relayed the situation to their commander, DM Thong. Without hesitation, DM Thong teleported directly to the Ha clans to assume command. Within mere hours, the two opposing forces finally stood face to face. The Thanh Van Sect master flew forward and spoke. fellow demonic cultivators, return to where you belong. This land is not meant for you. We have no reason to interfere with one another." DM Thong merely let out a cold snort before waving his hand, signaling the attack. Immediately, the demonic cultivators launched a relentless barrage of immortal techniques against the Thanh Van Sect's formation. The Thanh Van Sect activated its defensive array, forming a protective barrier before counterattacking with their own techniques. The battle dragged on for days, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. A prolonged stalemate ensued. Growing impatient, DM Thong finally ordered, "Attack with full force." For 5 days, he merely observed from the sidelines, issuing commands. However, upon realizing that he could no longer afford to delay, he finally rose and personally joined the fray. Seeing this, the Thanh Van Sect master had no choice but to engage as well. Thus, the two commanders clashed in a fierce battle of immortal techniques. After 5 days of intense combat, the Thanh Van Sect's forces began to show signs of fatigue. Their defensive lines wavered, and some weaker cultivators, unable to withstand the onslaught, were struck down, their bodies plummeting from the skies. The battle on the ground was equally dire. The demonic cultivators relentlessly assaulted the Thanh Van disciples. Those who had fallen unconscious due to their injuries were not immediately killed but left to be captured at an opportune moment. The remaining Thanh Van cultivators were too preoccupied with defending and attacking to spare time for rescuing their fallen comrades. The situation grew increasingly desperate. Chapter 41. The cultivators on the ground were significantly weaker, most of them being disciples below the mid-stage Foundation establishment realm, around level 17 or lower. On the 6th day, the ground forces completely collapsed. Countless Thanh Van Sect cultivators were struck down. Though they did not die, they lay on the battlefield, barely clinging to life due to severe injuries. The demonic cultivators, their momentum surging like an unstoppable tide, relentlessly pushed back the Thanh Van Sect forces. The remaining Thanh Van disciples on the ground were led by a few higher-level cultivators in the late stage to perfected Foundation establishment realm, levels 19 to 20. However, realizing they could no longer hold their ground, they were continuously forced to retreat. Meanwhile, in the sky, even the higher-ranking Thanh Van cultivators began to falter. Despite receiving steady supplies from their logistics team, they could no longer sustain their defense. By nightfall on the 6th day, the ground battlefield had completely crumbled. The remaining disciples who were not gravely wounded fled back to the sect. However, the aerial battle raged on until the morning of the 7th day. By then, the Thanh Van cultivators had visibly weakened. Many were struck down, plummeting to the ground, where they were swiftly captured by the demonic forces. Recognizing the dire situation, the Thanh Van Sect master and the remaining elders made a swift decision to retreat and return to their sect. Before the battle erupted, the rogue cultivators in the Ha family clan's territory had been completely unaware of the looming conflict. It was only when the thunderous clashes of battle filled the air that they realized something was wrong. Fearfully, they looked up at the sky, witnessing the violent struggle unfolding above. As the battle escalated, the rogue cultivators attempted to flee, abandoning all possessions in their desperate escape. However, before they could leave, an unknown formation barrier activated, trapping them inside. Some rogue cultivators, particularly those at mid-stage Qi refinement level 4, channeled their spiritual energy and repeatedly struck the barrier with their fists. Others used immortal techniques, desperately attacking in an attempt to break free. But it was all in vain. Despite exhausting their spiritual energy, the barrier remained unscathed. Not even a single crack appeared. Their hopes of escape faded as they realized they were completely trapped. During this chaotic time, countless rogue cultivators scattered in all directions, desperately trying to escape. However, the moment they spotted the demonic cultivators advancing, panic surged through them. Some fled, but they barely covered any distance before being captured. The demonic cultivators swiftly subdued them, rendering them unconscious. Others attempted a different approach, digging deep underground, hoping to evade capture by burrowing into the earth. But their fate was no different. Within 2 days, every single rogue cultivator had been captured. Meanwhile, DM Thong and the Thanh Van Sect master engaged in an intense duel. As the elders of Thanh Van Sect continued their retreat, only the two of them remained locked in battle. Seeing the Thanh Van elders withdraw, the demonic cultivators, despite suffering some losses, grew even more emboldened. Their morale soared as they pressed forward with renewed vigor. DM Thong unleashed his full power, relentlessly attacking the Thanh Van Sect master. Though the sect master fought valiantly, he eventually succumbed to his injuries and was captured by DM Thong. From a distance, the fleeing Thanh Van elders witnessed this shocking moment. Overcome with horror, they abandoned all thoughts of resistance and fled straight back to their sect. Upon reaching Thanh Van Sect's territory, the elders found themselves immediately targeted by a relentless barrage from the demonic cultivators. Explosions echoed across the sky as powerful techniques clashed, sending tremors rippling through the sect's land. The deafening noise startled the rogue cultivators residing within Thanh Van Sect's territory. Realizing the battle had reached their very doorstep, they rushed out of their homes in terror. Many left behind valuable supplies and belongings, prioritizing their survival above all else. Some ran deeper into Thanh Van Sect's territory, seeking refuge, while others fled even farther, hoping to reach the lands of other sections. Meanwhile, market houses belonging to nearby sects quickly recognized the growing threat. Without hesitation, merchants and cultivators alike gathered their goods, boarded their flying ships, and fled back to their own sects. A massive wave of people surged outward, a chaotic exodus resembling a swarm of bees fleeing a burning hive. Yet, the demonic cultivators paid little attention to these fleeing crowds. Instead, they remained focused on hunting down the Thanh Van elders. The pursuit continued until the elders barely managed to escape into the inner sect grounds, where they activated the defensive barrier. Inside Thanh Van Sect, cultivators of all levels, whether strong or weak, were thrown into turmoil. The fact that the battle had reached their very home was a terrifying revelation. Regardless of who would emerge victorious, the aftershocks of the battle alone could bring devastation to them. At that moment, self-preservation became the only priority. Without hesitation, countless cultivators fled, knowing if that staying behind only meant being caught in the crossfire. As soon as the defensive barrier was activated, the escaping elders finally found a moment of relief. Their breaths were heavy, their expressions somber. Though they had survived, the weight of their losses pressed heavily on their hearts. Many of their fellow disciples had been captured, and worst of all, their Thanh Van Sect master had fallen into enemy hands. Their Thanh Van Sect master, despite being only at the nascent soul level, had managed to hold his ground against the powerful demonic cultivator DM Thong for an extended period. He was truly a formidable warrior, deserving of the highest respect. But in the end, even great strength had its limits. Silence fell among the elders. Heads bowed. None of them spoke another word. Back to the protagonist. It was now the second month of the first quarter. Ye Jun stood in her lush spiritual field, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The crops were growing beautifully, and inside their home, her son Jun So was diligently practicing a new cultivation technique. Suddenly, a series of loud explosions erupted in the distance.
Boom, boom, boom.
The air trembled with each impact. A moment later, a female attendant rushed in, her face pale with urgency. "My lady!"
Run.
"The demonic cultivators are attacking." Ye Jun's heart clenched. Without wasting a second, she rushed inside, grabbed Jun So, and the three of them fled together, leaving behind everything except for a few essential belongings. Jun so mounting a flying sword, Ye Jun and female attendant followed behind, stepping lightly on bamboo leaves imbued with spiritual energy to fly away. But their flight speed was slow. Junso's was still weak in spiritual power, making it difficult to escape at high speed. As they hurried away, the female attendant called out, "My lady, we should head toward Thanh Van Sect. It might be safe there." She had personal reasons for this. Her family resided near Thanh Van Sect, and she hoped to reunite with them. Hearing this, Ye Jun extended her divine sense, scanning the area ahead. What she saw made her expression darken instantly. At a remote location near the entrance of Thanh Van, a large force of demonic cultivators was relentlessly attacking the elderly cultivators. Ye Jun's voice turned cold.
No.
That place is a battlefield. Going there is certain death. Without hesitation, the three of them changed course, choosing another direction to escape. In various other locations, numerous cultivators were also fleeing in haste, either running or flying away from the battlefield. Meanwhile, cultivators from other sects boarded their flying ships, swiftly departing at incredible speed. Within just a few hours, they had safely returned to their respective sects and reported the incident to their elders. However, they could only relay that someone had attacked Thanh Van Sect, without knowing which force was responsible. After a brief discussion, an elder from Thanh Ngo Immortal Sect volunteered to investigate the situation. Without hesitation, he soared into the sky, burning through a massive amount of spiritual energy as he traveled. As he approached within 30 kilometers of Thanh Van Sect, he extended his divine sense to observe from a distance. His face darkened instantly. What he saw was an overwhelming army of demonic cultivators, a swarming mass of enemies. Realizing the grave danger, the elder immediately turned back and hurriedly retreated. At Thanh Van Sect, the demonic army had fully concentrated its attacks on the defensive barrier. Although the barrier was of high rank, it simply could not withstand the relentless barrage of destructive techniques. Cracks began to form. Inside the sect, the elders and disciples of Thanh Van Sect watched in horror as the protective wall began to crumble. Panic spread through the ranks. Then boom! In an instant, the barrier shattered completely. The demonic cultivators swarmed in, flooding the sect grounds like a tidal wave. At the same time, on the ground, Thanh Van Sect's disciples rushed toward the rear exit, desperately trying to escape. But from the front gates, the demonic cultivators poured in, launching countless powerful techniques at the elders and disciples. The elders of Thanh Van Sect fought back fiercely, unleashing immortal after immortal techniques, talismans. However, the prolonged battle was draining their spiritual and soul energy at an alarming rate. Even with the aid of recovery pills, their energy could not regenerate fast enough to withstand the ceaseless assaults. Their forces began to retreat. The weaker disciples, unable to keep up, were quickly struck down, collapsing onto the ground, barely clinging to life. Meanwhile, the elder from Thanh Ngo Sect returned to his sect and urgently reported the situation to the sect master and all elders. A meeting was held to determine whether they should intervene. It took only a few moments for the sect master to reach a decision. They would not provide aid. Instead, they would observe from a distance. Even if they wished to help, it was simply impossible. The situation had escalated too quickly, and their logistics and supplies were completely unprepared for a battle of this scale. Thus, the entire group flew to a far-off vantage point, where they could monitor the situation from a safe distance. Using their divine sense, they soon detected a large number of people fleeing from Thanh Van Sect. Among them, they recognized several Thanh Van Sect elders. Chapter 42. Returning to the protagonist, as all three soared through the sky, they noticed many others fleeing in the same manner. Below them, a large number of people were scattering in all directions, desperately trying to escape the chaos at Thanh Van Sect. After flying for more than half an hour, Jun so spoke up, "Dad, I'm almost out of spiritual energy. I can't fly any longer." Hearing this, all three descended to the ground and continued their escape on foot. Although Jun So had reached the second level of the Qi refining stage, he was still very young, barely 6 years old. His young age imposed significant limitations, preventing the group from moving at full speed. Other groups of rogue cultivators were also running alongside them, their faces filled with fear and exhaustion. Meanwhile, back at Tango Immortal Sect, the disciples and elders watched as waves of people approached their territory. The fleeing cultivators from Thanh Van Sect looked pale and stricken with fear. One of their elders, his voice weak, cried out, "Run! The demonic cultivators are attacking." Upon spotting the members of Tango Immortal Sect, another elder from Thanh Van Sect pleaded, "Please help us. Repel them." Despite already being aware of the demonic cultivators' assault, the members of Thanh Sect remained indifferent, merely observing the chaos from a distance. Instead of offering aid, they swiftly issued a command for all their disciples and local civilians to retreat into the sect's secured grounds. However, due to the high population density of Thanh Sect, they could not accommodate all the refugees. Many rogue cultivators with lower cultivation levels were denied entry. With nowhere to go, these rogue cultivators and members of small clans grew increasingly desperate. Many began hastily gathering their belongings and abandoning their things, choosing to migrate even further, to DM Sect, a sect nearly 3,800 kilometers away. Thanh Sect's refusal to assist sealed Thanh Van Sect's fate. The battlefield was completely overrun by the demonic army. The remaining elders of Thanh Van Sect stood in silent despair, unable to utter a word. After living for so many years, they understood all too well the cold reality of human nature. Thanh Van Sect had fallen. Countless disciples were captured. Those who failed to escape in time were rounded up, while those who did manage to flee were too slow and were soon caught as well. With Thanh Van completely breached, the weaker demonic cultivators were ordered to track down and capture any remaining rogue cultivators. In just half a day, an overwhelming number of righteous cultivators had been taken prisoner. At the center of Thanh Van Sect's dust-filled plaza, DM Thong stood tall, letting out a resounding laugh. His voice echoed far and wide. By the next day, he had already fortified his hold over Thanh Van Sect. His actions had caused such a massive uproar that other sects across the continent were bound to take notice. Anticipating potential retaliation, he made immediate preparations. A group of demonic cultivators was quickly assigned to escort numerous cages filled with righteous cultivators back to the Western continent via a teleportation portal. The supreme leader of the demonic cultivation world soon received news of their victory. Overjoyed, he immediately commanded the sect's alchemists to work tirelessly, refining pills day and night. Inside the prison cages, countless captives sat or stood, their faces filled with bitterness and despair. None of them knew what fate awaited them. Among the prisoners was the grandson of Elder Deep, Deep Van Hao. He too had been captured and was being transported to the Western continent. His entire clan had been taken, with only their ancestral patriarch managing to escape. The Deep family patriarch had fled before Thanh Van Sect was completely overrun, escaping in a desperate rush toward Tango Immortal Sect. In his frantic escape, he hadn't been able to bring a single relative with him, abandoning his family to the chaos. Meanwhile, in the Western continent, countless demonic cultivators were busily refining pills. One by one, captured cultivators from the Northern continent were thrown into the scorching alchemical furnaces. Batch after batch of pills was produced, their thick, smoky fragrance drifting through the air as demonic cultivators reveled in their success. Back at Thanh Van Sect, after establishing a new position at Thanh Van Sect, DM Thong tightened his defenses. He planned to take a brief respite before launching further attacks on other regions of the Northern continent. The recent battle had consumed an enormous amount of resources. Over at Thanh Van Sect, the overwhelming influx of refugees quickly exceeded their capacity, forcing them to turn away rogue cultivators with lower cultivation levels. However, after some time passed with no sign of an impending demonic attack, the sect's cultivators began to relax. Even so, they reinforced their watchtowers and assigned more disciples to guard duty in preparation for any potential assault. The elders of Thanh Van Sect gathered to discuss a critical question. Should they launch a counterattack against the demonic cultivators? After extensive deliberation, they reached a decision. They would strike first to send a clear message and demonstrate their sect's strength. Yet, despite their bold intentions, they knew very little about their enemy. Where had this massive army of demonic cultivators come from? Why were they so numerous? All they knew was that demonic cultivators were primarily found in the Western continent. They speculated that this invading force had originated from there, but one question remained unanswered. How had they managed to cross the vast ocean, braving the countless sea demonic beasts along the way? No one had an answer. The only solution was to capture a demonic cultivator and interrogate them thoroughly to uncover the truth. 3 days later, all the necessary supplies for war were fully prepared. The sect was ready to battle and drive the demonic cultivators out of the northern continent. Despite their plans, they understood that this battle would be a costly one. That was why the high-ranking elders of Thanh Van Sect agreed on a strategy. The attack was meant to serve as a warning, to intimidate the demonic cultivators and prevent them from acting recklessly in the future. Far away, at DM Immortal Sect, nearly half a month later, both cultivators and common folk noticed an influx of wealthy cultivators from other regions arriving at their borders. Upon investigating the rumors, they finally received news. War had erupted due to the demonic cultivators. However, information was scarce, and the sect's upper echelon remained skeptical. They decided to send a mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator to investigate the situation. The higher-ups of DM Immortal Sect did not fully trust the rumors yet, so they refrained from making any moves. Instead, they treated it as a simple intelligence-gathering mission assigned to a few sect disciples. Meanwhile, at Thanh Van Sect, after several days of preparation, no demonic cultivators had launched any attacks against them. This extra time allowed them to reinforce their defensive formations and set up lethal battle arrays around the areas where rogue cultivators resided. Once all preparations were complete, several high-ranking elders set out toward Thanh Van Sect's territory, intending to send a strong message to the demonic cultivators. However, they knew that this act of intimidation would still cost them a significant amount of resources. A full-scale war to completely expel the demonic forces would lead to immense losses, something no sect leader was willing to risk. After all, Thanh Van Sect had never provided them with any real benefits, so why should they suffer heavy spent just to protect it? As the elders approached Thanh Van Sect's domain, a nascent soul early-stage cultivator, level 43, took a safe position near the sect's periphery. Using both his voice and divine sense, he projected a thunderous declaration across the entire region. Demonic cultivators, if you do not wish to face our wrath, leave this place immediately. Return to where you came from. Otherwise, you will suffer the full force of our fury. From a distance, the injured elders of Thanh Van Sect, though weakened, could still witness the unfolding events. They felt as if they were on the verge of reclaiming their sect. But if that were to happen, they knew it would come at a steep cost. Still, they were willing to pay that price if necessary. Upon hearing the unfamiliar voice, DM Thong, the demonic cultivator leader, examined the situation and quickly discovered that the speaker was a nascent soul cultivator, someone of lower rank than himself. Unfazed, he responded with a booming challenge. If you have the guts, come and face me. Immediately after, he ordered his forces to prepare for battle. Inside the grand hall of Thanh Van Sect, the sect master observed the unfolding confrontation through a large spiritual mirror. Elder Man Tien, realizing that the demonic cultivator DM Thong had provoked him, turned to his fellow sect members and announced the challenge. Without hesitation, he bellowed, "Attack!" In an instant, countless powerful techniques were unleashed toward the ruins of Thanh Van Sect. Already reduced to rubble, the sect's remaining structures crumbled further under the relentless barrage. The protective walls of the demonic cultivator's army shattered, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. The many thousand years foundation of Thanh Van Sect was now nothing more than dust. From a distance, the surviving elders and disciples of Thanh Van Sect bore witness to the destruction, their eyes filled with boundless sorrow. Their legacy had been erased, and they could do nothing to stop it. Even if they reclaimed the land, who knew how many years, perhaps centuries, it would take to restore their former glory? Hatred burned in their hearts. Chapter 43. The battle raged on as both sides relentlessly exchanged attacks. Immortal techniques, talismans, and powerful artifacts filled the battlefield with dazzling, yet deadly displays of power. Inside the grand hall of the demonic cultivators, DM Thong calmly observed the unfolding chaos. As time dragged on, he realized the prolonged skirmish would be detrimental to his forces. Without hesitation, he decided to act. Soaring into the sky, he targeted the highest-ranking elder of Thanh Van Sect, ignoring the lesser elders around him. The clash between the two powerhouses was intense, shaking the heavens and earth. However, despite occasional support from his fellow elders, Elder Man Tien of Thanh Van Sect soon found himself at a disadvantage. He began to worry and discreetly transmitted a message to his sect members. Prepare to retreat. Finding a brief moment to catch his breath, he turned and fled toward Thanh Van Sect. Seeing their leader retreat, the remaining elders and disciples swiftly followed. The demonic cultivators, eager to pursue, were halted by DM Thong. Instead, they returned to Thanh Van Sect's ruins, recuperating and preparing for the next battle. Meanwhile, in the Western continent, batches of alchemical pills, both healing elixirs and cultivation-boosting ones, were completed. These valuable resources were promptly sent to DM Thong. Receiving a large supply of cultivation-enhancing pills, DM Thong wasted no time, distributing and consuming them. His power surged rapidly. In just a short period, countless pills were absorbed. His cultivation skyrocketed, he from on the edge of reaching nascent soul perfection level 49.9. Finally, as he consumed the batch of pills, he broke through to the divine transformation. Other demonic cultivators followed. A golden core perfection open parenthesis golden elixir close parenthesis demonic cultivator successfully ascended to nascent soul early stage level 41. The battlefield trembled as more and more demonic cultivators experienced breakthroughs, triggering numerous tribulation lightning strikes that rained down upon them. Back at Thanh Van Sect, their leaders analyzed the situation and concluded that a direct confrontation was no longer viable. They needed to preserve their forces and wait for the right opportunity. Days later, their worst fears materialized. Through surveillance techniques, they discovered the demonic cultivators at Thanh Van Sect had undergone massive breakthroughs. Shock spread throughout Thanh Van Sect's leadership. The sect master, elders, and disciples all turned pale. Realizing they couldn't handle the growing threat alone, Thanh Van Sect reached out to DM Sect, proposing an alliance to eradicate the demonic cultivators. Both sects boasted divine transformation early-stage cultivators, making them roughly equal in strength. A united front could tilt the odds in their favor. When the sect master of DM Sect received the urgent request, she hesitated. She had lived for centuries, indulging in a life of luxury and comfort. The prospect of stepping onto the battlefield once more filled her with reluctance. In response, she sent a voice letter back. "I will consider your request." Her hesitation left the fate of the righteous cultivators uncertain. The leader of Thanh Sect received the news and immediately informed the other elders. Their expressions darkened upon hearing it. Determined to persuade the sect leader of Sect, the Thanh Sect leader personally flew to meet her. However, the Sect leader continuously evaded him, unwilling to discuss forming an alliance. Repeatedly turned away, the Thanh Sect leader realized that persuasion was futile. He abandoned his efforts and returned to his sect to discuss alternative strategies with the elders. Surrounded by 24 elders, they held a council and ultimately decided to preserve their sect's strength, fortify their defenses, and completely avoid the Thanh Van Sect's territory, treating it as a danger zone. A warning was issued, and all disciples were informed. The news also spread among the civilians residing in Thanh Sect's land. Returning to the protagonist. After leaving the Deep Clan's estate, the three traveled for several days. They continued to run for several days to reach area of the other sect. They ran after people. The road was packed with people rushing forward in desperation. After several exhausting days, they finally arrived at Thanh entrance gate. However, the sheer number of people seeking refuge had exceeded the sect's capacity. Countless rogue cultivators were denied entry, including Ye Jun and her companions. Seeing this, many cultivators immediately turned toward Sect, hoping that it was still accepting refugees. Ye Jun turned to her female attendant and asked, "Do you have any way to contact someone from the Deep family clan to get us inside Thanh?" The female attendant replied, "I'll try." She pulled out a voice jade and waited. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour, but there was no response. With a troubled expression, she said, "I can't reach anyone from the Deep clan. Let's wait a little longer, and I'll try again." With no other choice, the three of them moved to a quieter spot to eat and rest. Having lived in the Deep clan's estate for some time, Ye Jun hadn't stockpiled any extra supplies. Her storage pouch contained very little food, basically cannot be maintained for long. She was born into poverty and had long grown accustomed to hardship, but even with the most frugal rations, her limited supplies wouldn't last. Looking around, she noticed that many other rogue cultivators faced the same dire situation. She let out a heavy sigh. Never in her life did she imagine that, even in the world of cultivation, she would one day become a refugee. Hatred flared in her heart toward the demonic cultivators who had turned her life, and the lives of so many others, into chaos. She had always believed that the battles between righteous and demonic cultivators were mere stories in novels. But now, they were in her life. This war was unfolding right before her eyes, in her very life. She felt life was difficult, not easy at all. After cooking a small pot of porridge, Ye Jun called the other two to eat together. Days of fleeing had left both her child and herself exhausted. After resting for a while, the female attendant once again tried to contact someone from the Deep clan inside Thanh market district. This time, luck was on her side. She received a response. A few hours later, they were granted entry into Thanh, thanks to a well-placed bribe from the Deep clan. As they passed through the gates, countless rogue cultivators looked at them with envy, their eyes burning with desperation. Many of them pleaded with the gate guards, begging for a chance to enter. Some even attempted to bribe their way in, but they simply didn't have enough money to meet the price. Seeing an opportunity, several disciples of Thanh sect began demanding a fee is 1 mid-grade spirit stone per person to allow entry. Almost rogue cultivators came from impoverished backgrounds. Even if they saved for centuries, they still wouldn't be able to pay such an exorbitant amount. Losing hope, some gave up on entering and instead chose different paths, some heading toward the towering mountains, others making the arduous journey to Sect, or seeking refuge in smaller family clans. The road to Sect was long and treacherous. Although cultivators possessed greater endurance than mortals, such an extended journey was still grueling. Worse yet, high-ranked demonic beasts with height level, attacking at every opportunity. Many cultivators and small clans perished, either slain or devoured by these creatures. Meanwhile, Ye Jun, her son, and the female attendant successfully entered Tongge. The Deep clan arranged temporary lodging for them. The Deep clan had a small business presence in Thanh Van Sect, but its income was modest. Their true wealth had always been concentrated at Thanh Van Sect. But when Thanh Van Sect was destroyed and occupied, the Deep clan's assets was obliterated along with it. Countless buildings, market, spirit herb gardens, and mineral mines were reduced to ruins in the aftermath of the battle. The patriarch of the Deep clan had been fortunate enough to escape during the demonic cultivators' attack. Now, he sat despondently in a courtyard within Tongge's territory. Almost all of his main family clan was captured. Most of his kin captured, leaving him as the sole escape who had managed to flee to Tongge. But this place was merely a small estate, a minor asset of his once prosperous family. With such meager resources, rebuilding the clan seemed an almost impossible task. He longed to restore his family's former glory, but he knew it would be arduous. His gaze drifted into the void, lost in distant thoughts. Everything from status to wealth had vanished. Now, all he had left was a fraction of what once belonged to him, an insignificant remnant compared to his former riches. Rebuilding was nothing short of an impossible dream. It was like a man who had once been wealthy suddenly finding himself bankrupt, stripped of everything. To start over and rise again was as difficult as pick stars from the sky. Chapter 44. Ye Jun, her son, and the female attendant were assigned to a rundown courtyard. Despite its poor condition, Ye Jun was overjoyed. She knew that simply being within the territory of Thanh Van Sect meant greater safety compared to wandering outside. Not to mention, areas near sects often contained spiritual mineral veins, allowing those who lived nearby to absorb spiritual energy more efficiently. When Patriarch Deepland Tien received news that a concubine of one of his grandsons had come seeking refuge, he agreed without hesitation. He didn't even know which grandson she belonged to, but it didn't matter. Allowing her to stay wouldn't cost him much anyway. After he had completely calmed down, he began to ask to meet the sect master of Tongge to request a position as an elder of Tongge. 4 days, he waited, only to be saw a rejection. Tongge sect already had too many elders. They couldn't afford to take in another, especially not a former elder of Thanh Van Sect. In fact, they had refused many high-ranking cultivators from Thanh Van. To Tongge's leadership, those who had fled and abandoned their sect and clans were nothing more than cowards. No matter how strong they did not deserve a place among Tongge's elders. Moreover, adding more elders would only drain resources and finances. There was simply no reason to accept them. After stabilizing themselves in Tongge's territory, the displaced elders and cultivators of Thanh Van Sect finally understood they would not be accepted. They had no choice but to start over from scratch. Life was now far more difficult than before, but at least they had found safety. Outside, demonic cultivators were on the rise. In such times, even a difficult life in a safe place was better than wandering aimlessly in danger. Still, they held on to one unspoken thought. If Tongge sect ever fell, they would run again very fast. She quickly cleared the small plot, tilled the soil, and planted new seedlings. Outside, many rogue cultivators also prepared for the new planting season, each tending to their own affairs. The Tongge sect's cultivators continued to keep a security, even though it had been nearly a month since the demonic cultivators' attack. A sense of relief filled the air as people welcomed the farming season. Then, a new decree was issued from Tongge sect to all residents cultivators within their territory. The announcement read, "This is a sensitive time due to the presence of the demonic cultivators. Therefore, to ensure life and safety, all cultivators with cultivation levels from the 7th level of Qi refining or above must participate in logistics services for the sect for 3 months. The cost of rent and taxes will increase more 20%. The price of goods sold will also increase accordingly. The purchase price will not change. In addition, there will be an additional fee per person. Each cultivator must pay 10 low-grade spirit stones per year. If they cannot pay this fee, they will be expelled. If they do not want to be expelled, they can become mineral slaves or spirit farm slaves for 3 months. Next, it is strictly forbidden for cultivators to fly in the sky if they are not members of the Tongge. If they violate, they will receive extremely painful consequences. The residents were very upset but powerless. If they wanted to live in a safe zone, they had to pay and contribute. That was the harsh reality. Within Thanh Sect, the rise of demonic forces and the fall of Thanh Van Sect had reinforced a single truth. They might not have the strength to fight back, but they could fortify their defenses. Yet defense came at a cost. Thus, extracting more wealth from the populace was unnecessary. Impose extra levies to offset the deficit. Although the Thanh Sect's defense efforts incurred costs, these expenses were within a controlled limit. More importantly, this situation provided an excellent opportunity for the sect's upper echelon to exploit the populace by increasing various levies. The more they collected, the wealthier the sect's treasury grew, ensuring greater benefits for both inner and outer disciples. However, the largest share of these profits still belonged to the ruling elite. Back at the small courtyard where Ye Jun and her son resided, life seemed to have settled into a peaceful rhythm. One afternoon, a messenger from the Deep family arrived and addressed Ye Jun. "My lady, the patriarch has spoken. Although you are considered a concubine of his grandson, you have yet to bear a child. Thus, out of goodwill, he will continue to provide you with shelter, but all other expenses, including food and the mandatory contributions to Thanh Sect, must be charged by you." Ye Jun listened carefully and understood the message. She accepted it without complaint. Being allowed to stay here at all was already a generous favor from the Deep patriarch. She felt no resentment. In fact, she now realized that being forced to become Van House concubine was perhaps not as terrible as she had once believed. A few days later, a sect cultivator at the early foundation establishment level arrived at Ye Jun's door. He recorded the number of occupants in her house, collected the required tax, and informed her of the mandatory service period. Ye Jun complied without resistance. Her cultivation at the 7th level of Qi refinement was easily detected when the cultivator used a spiritual artifact to scan her. Since Ye Jun had never learned any techniques to conceal her aura, it was only natural that this artifact would reveal her level of cultivation. The newly issued regulations applied to all residents within the Thanh Sect's territory, without exception. Regardless of one's cultivation level, compliance was mandatory. Many factions, as well as high-ranking elders and powerful cultivators, were displeased upon hearing the new laws. Yet, whether they liked it or not, they had no choice but to accept and contribute. Formerly, they were high and mighty, standing on top. But now that they are no longer stand in power, they have to accept what has been arranged. As for the wealthier high-level cultivators, they had ways to circumvent certain rules. With enough resources, they could bribe their way out of obligations or hire others to serve in their place, an arrangement quietly tolerated by the sect's overseeing cultivator officials. Chapter 45. After the new regulations were enacted, a vast amount of wealth flowed into the Thanh Sect's treasury. Meanwhile, both inner and outer sect disciples also amassed considerable riches through unofficial means, exploiting the common folk. They forced to pay more just to maintain a semblance of safety. The residents, whether long-time settlers or newcomers, could only swallow their bitterness and comply. They clung to the hope that the demonic cultivator crisis would soon be resolved so they could return to the stable and secure lives they once knew. However, for the majority of impoverished rogue cultivators, life had never been particularly good to begin with. Now, it was even worse. For miners, spiritual farmers, and laborers, the mandatory tribute of 10 low-grade spirit stones represented an entire year's of savings. Yet, With the additional fees and rising costs, their hard-earned savings quickly vanished. After a year of toil, all they could afford was mere survival. They cursed the demonic cultivators who had plunged them into this hardship, though there was nothing they could do but seethe in silent resentment. For the cultivators within Thanh Van Sect, the fall of Thanh Van Sect was both a shocking event and a golden opportunity to fill their pockets with wealth. Even though they enjoyed privileged access to sect resources, greed knew no bounds. More wealth meant greater influence, better cultivation materials, and a more comfortable life. Ironically, while the common folk cursed the demonic cultivators, some within the sect quietly thanked demonic cultivators for creating the chaos that allowed them to exploit the people further. They focused only on their immediate gains, never considering the long-term consequences of demonic cultivators' war. They naively believed that the sect's power would be enough to repress the demonic cultivators, allowing them to maintain their so-called safe zone, a place where they could continue squeezing wealth from the people under the guise of safe order. When Ye Jun received news of the new regulations, she felt no discomfort at all. In the modern world she had lived in, such events frequently occurred across many nations. It was an inevitable reality that she, along with countless others, had learned to accept and live with. Somewhere deep in the mountains, many rogue cultivators and members of small cultivation clans had fled the war-torn regions, journeying far into an unfamiliar forest. Though the forest was home to spirit beasts, it was not overly dangerous, making it a passable refuge. Banding together, they formed a small community, protecting one another while rebuilding their lives. Over time, they gradually adapted to life in this remote mountain forest. Although they occasionally faced attacks from Qi condensation-level spirit beasts, the presence of a few Foundation establishment cultivators among the small clan members reassured the majority of the rogue cultivators. These stronger cultivators could suppress lower-tier spirit beasts, providing a semblance of security even in the face of frequent attacks. For low-ranking rogue cultivators, simply having a place to live was already a blessing. However, for members of small cultivation families' clans, mere survival was not enough. What they sought was not just a place to live, but a place where they could cultivate and grow stronger. Though the natural spiritual energy in the area was full, their cultivation progress remained slow. What they truly desired was a spiritual or vain thing that could enhance their ability to absorb spiritual energy and accelerate their path to high level. They had lost their homes and the ideal environment for cultivation when the war broke out. Now, though they had found a relatively safe place to live, it came at the cost of slowing their cultivation progress. With such a low absorption rate of spiritual energy, they had no idea when they would ever reach higher realms. Though they were dissatisfied, neither the rogue cultivators nor the members of small cultivation families' clans had any choice in the matter. Within just 20 days, houses and gardens had taken shape, marking the beginning of their new lives. Deep in the mountains stood a small temple, home to a handful of monk cultivators. No one knew exactly how long they had been there. Protective formations and restriction arrays surrounded the temple, preventing spirit beasts and strangers from intruding. Because of this, the temple remained peaceful, with only the occasional sounds of chanting and distant bells echoing through the air. This temple upheld a tradition. Every 40 to 50 years, they would send someone out to recruit new disciples, ensuring the temple's legacy continued. Now was the time for this cycle to repeat. A mid-stage golden core monk descended the mountain in search of those fated to cultivate the temple's Buddhist teachings. A faint meditative fragrance emanated from him, blending with the air, as if every breath he took carried a profound Buddhist intent. This subtle aura, infused with his spiritual pressure, made low-level spirit beasts and demonic creatures instinctively fearful. Simply sensing his presence was enough to deter them from approaching. As he descended the mountain, the monk eventually came across a small village. It was unfamiliar to him. He had never seen such a settlement here before. Curious, he approached and entered. The cultivators working in the village noticed the monk's arrival but said nothing. Each remained focused on their own tasks. He walked further in and began making inquiries. The monk was not particularly surprised by the village's existence. After all, in the span of 50 years, many things could change. It was perfectly normal for a settlement to have emerged within that time. Approaching a rogue cultivator's household, the monk asked, "Benefactor, this humble monk has cultivated in the mountains for many years. Upon descending, I discovered this village, which was not here before. May I ask what this place is called?" The rogue cultivator responded, "This village was only established recently, so it doesn't have a name yet. It's only been about a month." He then gazed into the distance, his voice turning heavy. We used to live in the region of the Thanh Van Sect. But war broke out, and we were forced to flee here. Now, we must rebuild everything from scratch. It hasn't been easy. It all feels so nostalgic." After making a few inquiries, the monk took his leave. He wandered around for a while, observing the village before departing completely. Most of the people here were spirit farmers, cultivators who specialized in growing spiritual plants. Unfortunately, none of them possessed the kind of spiritual roots that would make them suitable for his temple's path of cultivation. Spirit farmers generally had weaker spiritual roots, which made them incompatible with the temple's teachings. The monk was well aware of the Thanh Van Sect, though he rarely visited it due to its distant location. As he continued on his journey beyond the village, he encountered a lone cultivator, someone from a small cultivation clan. Upon seeing the monk, the Ye cultivator stepped forward and greeted him. "Greetings, Master Monk." The monk gave a slight nod. "Greetings, benefactor." The young cultivator continued, "There is a war going on outside. Master Monk, you should avoid heading toward the Thanh Van Sect or its surrounding areas. This is just a small warning, even though Thanh Van Sect is still quite far from here." The monk raised an eyebrow.
Oh,
"There is war in that region?" he asked with keen interest. The young cultivator sighed. "That's right. I lived there myself." Out of nowhere, a whole army of demonic cultivators launched an assault, besieging the sect and ultimately taking sect down. "We had no choice but to flee and ended up here." He paused before adding, "I've given my warning. Farewell, Master Monk. I have matters to attend to." With that, the young cultivator left, disappearing down the path. The monk stood still, deep in thought. He now understood the situation. Demonic cultivators had laid siege to a righteous sect. A fire burned within him. His nature as a monk compelled him to eradicate evil and guide the lost. The thought of heading to Thanh Van Sect and assessing the situation took root in his mind. If possible, he would bring salvation to these wretched demonic cultivators, leading them onto the righteous path. It was a noble intention, yet an utterly reckless one. Thanh Van Sect had nascent soul cultivators, and even they had been unable to withstand the demonic invasion. The monk, despite his unwavering conviction, was only at the golden core stage. And yet, he still thought about converting the demonic cultivators. A truly mad idea from him. The monk had spent countless years cultivating in the deep mountains, detached from the world. He had no clear understanding of the strength of the cultivators at Thanh Van Sect. That ignorance fueled his boldness. As a high-level monk who had lived for many years, he had seen many lost souls. It was natural for monks of his caliber to believe in redemption, to try and bring wayward souls back to the righteous path, save sentient beings. With his decision made, he soared into the sky, heading directly toward Thanh Van Sect. Chapter 46. Being at the golden core stage, his spiritual energy was abundant. Within just 2 days, he had nearly reached his destination. Even though he had secluded himself in the mountains for decades, his memory was sharp. He still recalled the direction of Thanh Van Sect. By the time he arrived, the sky had completely darkened. He concealed his presence and spread his divine sense, scanning the entire sect. Inside the sect, a fallen sanctuary, the Grand Hall of Thanh Van Sect, once a majestic palace of righteousness, now stood as the dark heart of demonic rule. At its center, the demonic cultivator DM Thong sat in deep meditation. This very hall had once belonged to the sect leader of Thanh Van Sect, but now it was nothing more than a throne for a conqueror. Suddenly, DM Thong's eyes snapped open. He sensed it, an unfamiliar divine sense sweeping across the area. A sharp glint flashed in his gaze. He wasn't the only one to notice. Other demonic cultivators at the Golden Core stage also felt the intrusion. Although they had set up formations over the sect, those were mostly defensive in nature. Concealment formations? Illusion arrays? They had no need for such cowardly measures. After all, their power had been overwhelming so far, crushing all resistance with ease. Arrogance bred negligence. A dozen Golden Core demonic cultivators erupted into the sky, forming a terrifying formation in the air. One of them, a mid-stage Golden Core cultivator, roared, "Who dares trespass into our territory and spy on us?" The monk ascended into the sky, his presence radiating a subdued yet sacred golden glow of Buddhist light. The sheer pressure of his aura made the demonic cultivators instinctively turn their gazes toward him. With a thunderous voice, he proclaimed, "I am Monk Tuesday Chan. I have come to persuade you to abandon this path before it is too late. Those who are lost in the sea of suffering chase after fleeting gains, yet do they ever realize that it is all but an illusion? Fame, power, resentment, in the end, what can one truly take with them except for the burdens of karma?" The faint Buddhist radiance emanating from his body spread outward, resembling a sun piercing through the eternal night. Upon hearing his words, the faces of the demonic cultivators darkened. Discomfort and irritation flashed in their eyes. A demonic cultivator at the early Golden Core stage sneered before replying in a mocking tone, "Bald-headed monk. No matter what you say, we won't listen. Our path is the strongest, do you understand?" He narrowed his eyes, a sinister smirk curling at his lips. "Before you, countless monks and righteous cultivators have been refined within our furnace. They all preach the same lofty ideals as you.
And, in the end,
they became nothing more than nourishment for our great path. Would you like to join them?" As he finished speaking, the other demonic cultivators erupted into laughter. Their dark energy surged like a tidal wave, spreading outward and engulfing Tuesday Chan in its suffocating embrace. The monk's expression turned grave. He spoke solemnly. "You refuse to heed my words? Then I shall use the light of Buddhism to subdue and enlighten you." Then, the monk chanted a short sutra for a few seconds, and an intense burst of Buddhist light radiated outward. Without hesitation, he struck with a powerful palm technique, sending a devastating force toward the demonic cultivators. The sheer pressure of his attack seemed capable of subduing anyone caught in its path. Upon seeing the dazzling Buddhist light and the incoming palm strike, the demonic cultivators merely sneered. One of them, a mid-stage Golden Core demonic cultivator at level 35, retaliated by unleashing a wave of dark mist, colliding head-on with the monk's luminous strike. Buddhist techniques inherently suppress dark arts, and demonic cultivation techniques were particularly vulnerable to their effects. In an instant, the monk's palm strike shattered the dark mist and continued surging toward the group of demonic cultivators. However, another demonic cultivator scoffed and immediately countered with his own attack. The two forces collided and dissipated upon impact. Though his initial strike had been neutralized, Monk Tuesday Chan did not falter. Without hesitation, he unleashed a flurry of successive palm strikes, each imbued with powerful Buddhist energy, raining down upon the demonic cultivators. It was an act of immense courage, one lone monk daring to challenge an entire group of demonic cultivators in an attempt to enlighten them. One of the demonic cultivators shouted mockingly, "Foolish bald old donkey. Witness the power of our arts. In response, a barrage of dark arts and demonic immortal erupted from the cultivators, hurtling toward Monk Tuesday Chan, seeking both to neutralize his attacks and to strike him down. On one side, the monk relentlessly unleashed Buddhist techniques. On the other, the demonic cultivators countered with waves of dark arts. The battlefield became a storm of clashing forces, techniques dissolving, breaking through, and surging toward one another. As the battle raged on, Monk Tuesday Chan gradually realized that his individual strength was insufficient against the combined might of the demonic cultivators. It became evident that he could not hope to enlighten them through force alone. Accepting this reality, he abruptly ceased his attacks and turned to flee, his voice echoing through the night. "I will return to enlighten you all another day." The group of demonic cultivators stared at one another in bewilderment. "He ran away already," one of them talked. The bald donkey had barely fought for a moment before fleeing. Amused, the entire group gave chase, their faces filled with delight at the unexpected turn of events. A sneering voice rang out. "Bald donkey, why are you running? Have you given up on enlightening us?" One of the demonic cultivators flicked a pearl toward the fleeing monk. The pearl shot through the air at terrifying speed before detonating with a deafening explosion, releasing a dense cloud of dark energy. Despite his fly speed, Monk Tuesday Chan was caught in the blast. Sensing something rapidly approaching him, the monk frowned but did not panic. In an instant, he activated a protective Buddhist light, enveloping his body in a golden glow. The corrosive dark energy clashed against his protective aura but dissipated harmlessly. Without hesitation, he pressed forward, flying swiftly away from the dangerous territory. After chasing for a while, the demonic cultivators eventually halted, exchanging glances before laughing mockingly. They turned back, clearly pleased with themselves. Inside the grand hall of the demonic area, several high-ranking elders at the nascent soul stage watched the events unfold with mild amusement. Some smirked, while others whispered among themselves, their words laced with disdain. "What a pathetic bald donkey," one of them remarked. Having escaped the demonic cultivator's domain, Monk Tuesday Chan landed in a secluded forest, perching on a sturdy tree branch. He sat down cross-legged, entering meditation to slowly restore his spiritual energy. Deep in thought, he reflected on the battle. "My level is still too low. If I were stronger, perhaps I could have truly enlightened those lost souls." At dawn, he resumed his journey, soaring toward Thanh Van Sect. Despite the passage of time, the outer perimeter of the sect remained crowded with rogue cultivators, living in makeshift camps. These wandering cultivators harbored a faint hope that the sect's higher-ups would take pity on them and grant them entry. Some of them had spent decades as rogue cultivator, yet a trace of naivete remained in their minds. But was such hope truly warranted? From ancient times, the ruling elite, the ones who stood high above, had never truly cared for the weak. Their only concern was profit. If these low-level cultivators had something of value to offer, perhaps the sect's higher-ups would spare them a glance. Otherwise, they weren't even worth a flicker of attention. Chapter 47. Those who couldn't enter Thanh Van Sect's domain were, by default, the poorest and weakest of cultivators, practically worthless in the eyes of the powerful. They had nothing to offer, save for the stench of desperation. It was clear that Thanh Van Sect's high-ranking leaders would never spare them a second glance. Within the vast expanse of Thanh Van Sect's territory, countless cultivators thrived. The sheer number of inhabitants was already enough to fill the sect's coffers to the brim. And that wasn't even considering the smaller noble families residing under the sect's jurisdiction. A steady river of wealth flowed into the sect's treasury, only to be diverted, through entirely proper procedures, of course, into the personal pockets of those at the top. After days of travel, both on foot and through the skies, Monk Tuesday Chan finally reached the borders of Thanh Van Sect. The sight that greeted him was disheartening. Numerous low-level cultivators had pitched makeshift camps outside the sect's boundaries. Approaching them, he asked, "Why do you camp here instead of entering the sect's main grounds?" One of the rogue cultivators sighed and explained, "We are survivors from Thanh Van Sect. We barely escaped the war, but upon arriving here, we were denied entry. Thanh Van Sect does not allow free passage. If we wish to settle within their territory, we must pay an exorbitant fee." The cultivator shook his head, frustration clear in his voice. "Most of us are merely spiritual farmers or miners. Our earnings are meager. The sum they demand is beyond our reach. And so we camp here, hoping that one day, perhaps, the sect's elders will show mercy and grant us entry." The man let out a bitter chuckle. "But if we wait too long, we'll have no choice but to move on and seek another haven. We can only hope that the next place we find will be safer." Monk Tuesday Chan listened carefully, his mind processing everything. Without hesitation, he approached the main gate of Thanh Van Sect. As he neared, a sect guard stepped forward and inquired, "Master, are you seeking to reside within Thanh Van Sect? If so, the entry fee is 1 mid-grade spirit stone." Upon hearing the price, Tuesday Chan sighed inwardly. Such an exorbitant fee. It's no wonder these low-level cultivators are stranded outside. Shaking his head, he clasped his hands together and spoke. "I am Tuesday Chan. I have urgent matters to discuss with the sect's higher-ups." The guard's expression remained indifferent. "Master, this is a sensitive time. The elders of Thanh Van Sect are not meeting outsiders, especially those with a cultivation level as low as yours. You should return at a more appropriate time. Open parenthesis, once the demonic cultivators are fully dealt with, that is, close parenthesis." Tuesday Chan's eyes flickered. "It is precisely about this issue that I have come to discuss." The guard, now slightly annoyed, cut him off. "Thanh Van Sect welcomes you, master. However, given your current cultivation, you lack the qualifications to meet with our superiors. Please take your leave." With that, the guard turned away, no longer acknowledging Tuesday Chan's presence. Denied entry. Tuesday Chan did not grow angry. Instead, he turned around and made his way back to the temple, intending to inform his fellow monks of what had transpired. After 2 days of flying back, Monk Tuesday Chan quickly made his way to report the situation to his martial uncle. Monk Nguyen spoke in a solemn tone. "We have cultivated in silence for so many years. Perhaps this is the time for us to step into the world, sweep away evil, and guide the lost to enlightenment." With that, he summoned many of his fellow monks, both his generation and Tuesday Chan's, to discuss their course of action. Soon after, they set out for the Thanh Van Sect's territory, determined to purify the demonic cultivators. The temple's lineage, the monastery where Tuesday Chan resided, followed a structured naming convention. Chan Nguyen, Tuesday Jiak Min, Dao, Han, Vien, Tan, Chin. Based on this system, Tuesday Chan belonged to the 3rd generation of this secluded monastery. Among the 10 monks departing for this mission, the strongest had reached the nascent soul early stage, while the rest, including Tuesday Chan, were at the late golden core stage. As the 10 monks descended from the mountain, golden Buddhist radiance spread through the surroundings. The spiritual pressure of their presence alone caused nearby demonic beasts to cower in their caves, while others fled in terror, escaping the oppressive aura of the Buddhist cultivators. The group of 10 monks flew toward the Thanh Van Sect's borders. Upon arrival, they were met by the sect's gatekeepers. A nascent soul stage monk stepped forward and declared, "We are monks from Mount X. We request an audience with your sect master to discuss the eradication of demonic cultivators in the Thanh Van Sect's region. Please deliver our message." Without waiting for a response, he calmly retrieved a pouch from his storage bag. Inside were 100 low-grade spirit stones. He discreetly placed it into the gatekeeper's hand. He knew well that in sects like these, words alone carried no weight. Wealth or absolute strength were the only ways to negotiate. This time, faced with a cultivator of high standing, the gatekeeper was noticeably more cautious and respectful. Without hesitation, he reported the matter to his superiors. Soon, word spread. A group of esteemed Buddhist monks had arrived to meet the cultivators of Thanh Van Sect. The sect master of Thanh Van Sect smiled warmly. "Welcome, esteemed masters. We are honored by your presence." A high-ranking monk stepped forward and stated firmly, "Fellow Taoists, the demonic cultivators have been running rampant, slaughtering countless innocents. If we do not act soon, the righteous path itself may fall into peril. We propose that we swiftly purge these evildoers and restore peace to the land." The sect master and the elders all nodded in agreement. The sect master spoke. "We have already made our preparations, and we're merely waiting for the right time to act. With your esteemed monastery joining us, this is indeed a fortunate turn of events. Rather than delaying any longer, why not begin today?" A seasoned monk responded cautiously. "If we engage in battle, we must plan carefully. A direct confrontation may lead to heavy casualties." The entire grand hall fell into thought. Moments later, everyone nodded in agreement. A large flying warship was summoned. Thanh Van Sect had meticulously prepared for this battle. Supplies, formations, and strategy were all in place. Their forces set out for the Thanh Van Sect's territory, where the demonic cultivators occupied. As the monks stood upon the deck, they gazed ahead, their destination drawing closer. With the speed of the warship, they arrived far faster than if they had flown individually. Upon nearing the enemy stronghold, the sect master of Thanh Van Sect unleashed his divine sense, amplifying his voice across the battlefield. "I am the sect master of Thanh Van Sect. I have come today to demand your immediate surrender. Leave this territory at once, or prepare to face the wrath of Buddhist enlightenment and the fury of righteous flames." Countless low-level demonic cultivators were startled, scrambling out of their quarters to gaze at the floating ship above. Higher-level demonic cultivators, those at the golden core stage and above, ascended into the sky, standing face-to-face with the figures on the ship. A mid-nascent soul demonic cultivator sneered. "You defeated ones dare to show up before us again? Are you not afraid of our fury?" With just a few words, he signaled the other demonic cultivators to launch an attack on the ship. The righteous cultivators of Thanh Van Sect and the monks saw the incoming waves of immortal dark arts attacks. A monk scoffed. Typical of demonic fiends, their nature is beyond redemption. Without hesitation, they unleashed their own arts to counter the assault. The sky erupted in deafening explosions as arts clashes sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. Despite the demonic cultivators having superior individual cultivation levels, the monks' Buddhist techniques had a natural suppressive effect on them. The monks' attacks weakened the demonic arts, shifting the balance of power. However, not a single demonic cultivator stopped their onslaught. They continued hurling dark arts at the flying ship without pause. Chapter 48. The demonic cultivators unleashed their most powerful techniques upon the monks, each striking with full force. The highest-ranking monk stepped forward, his gaze calm yet resolute. With a solemn chant, he cast a art and hurled a strand of glossy black prayer beads into the air. The immortal artifact expanded, growing larger as it spun in a circular motion. Like a whirling boomerang, it swept through the battlefield, neutralizing the dark arts of the demonic cultivators before returning seamlessly to his hand. The battle raged on for days. Countless pills were consumed as both sides fought relentlessly. The sect master of Thanh Van Sect and his elders wore grim expressions. Witnessing such massive resource depletion was a bitter sight. Though he was master secret with a divine transformation stage cultivator, far above the level of these demonic cultivators and even monks, he found himself unable to suppress them completely. The prolonged conflict had drained an unimaginable amount of elixir's plils. Such resources could have propelled the sect's growth, saving years, perhaps even decades, of cultivation effort. Yet here they were, being squandered in a fruitless war against these dark demonic cultivators. As the days passed, both sides seemed evenly matched. The battle had devolved into a prolonged stalemate, not a decisive victory, but an endless drain of energy and resources. The monks and righteous cultivators gradually came to a grim realization. They could not subdue the demonic cultivators, nor could they gain anything from this fight. Instead, they were simply burning through their precious supplies for nothing. Like any raging fire, war, too, must eventually die down when fuel runs out. With dwindling resources and exhaustion setting in, no one spoke, yet a silent understanding spread among them. This was no longer a battle, it was merely a desperate struggle against depletion. The flames of war were flickering, threatening to fade at any moment. It was time to stop before everything was reduced to ashes. A shared resolve formed in their hearts, unspoken yet unanimous. And so, at the very moment when the final, strongest techniques clashed in the air, the flying ship abruptly accelerated. Within moments, it vanished beyond the horizon, swallowed by the golden light of the rising sun. Book number 4 ends here. Continue reading in book number 5. Love this book, you can donate for the author. Thank you and goodbye, see you in next book. Book 5.